What is the most fucked up thing that happened in a children's TV show? I remember that episode of the Magic School Bus when that ginger dude took off his helmet in space after being told not to and his dome turned to ice or something like that. Spooked me as a kid. Like most of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Remember when SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs murdered and buried the health inspector? There was a very special anti-drug episode of the 80s cartoon Brave Star. In this episode, a couple of kids get hooked on a new drug. At the end of the episode, one of the kids died from an overdose. 30 plus years later, and I'm not sure how many children's shows even today would kill a kid. Speaking from personal experience, it was when the Watergate hearings replaced my usual after-school helping of Batman. And it went on for months. That episode of Thomas the Tank Engine when Thomas visits the scrap heap where all the dead dying trains are. I remember watching it as a kid and not even thinking about how Thomas is basically surrounded by a bunch of corpses or people left to die. Either the series finale of Alf in which Alf is captured by the government presumably to be experimented on. Or the series finale of Dinosaurs in which the entire civilization is destroyed. There's this Hey Arnold episode called The Ghost Bride, and the story is basically that this lady was madly in love with her fiancé but was stood up at the altar because he had fallen in love with her sister. And married her the very next day. So the lady goes berserk and puts on her wedding dress. Gets snacks from her basement. Walks to the newlywed couple's home. Kills them both in their beds. And when the cops come, she's rocking back and forth in a rocking chair next to the bodies. Throwing rice on them and humming the wedding march. To finish it all off, she immediately jumps out of the window and kills herself. Not really as messed up as out of these, but still creepy. That episode of Tom and Jerry where Tom gets depressed and sits on a railroad track, waiting for a train to come. Then Jerry comes to join him sitting down. The episode cuts to black and ends. And it never mentions it after that. Strange. Henry the Tank Engine was bricked up inside an abandoned tunnel for having anxiety while Ringo Starr mocked him. Not exactly on the children's show itself, but about 20 years ago during a midday episode of the Spider-Man cartoon. The news broke in to cover a live high-speed chase that ended in a standoff on a popular Los Angeles freeway. The suspect abruptly blew the top of his own head off with a rifle on live television. The top of his head literally flapped open like a can of SpaghettiOs. Camera caught everything. I assure you kids watching that were never the same. Megatron executing Ironhide by shooting him in the head point blank as he crawled along the floor in Transformers the movie in 1986. Eater thanks for the silver award and 1k likes. 1965. Miffed at having to work on the holiday. Sales ended his live broadcast by encouraging his young viewers to tiptoe into their still sleeping parents' bedrooms and remove those funny green pieces of paper with pictures of U.S. presidents from their pants and pocketbooks. Put them in an envelope and mail them to me. Soupy instructed the children. 12. Several days later, substantial amounts of money had begun arriving in the mail. Sales stated that the total amount received was in the thousands of dollars but qualified that by stating that much of that was in play money. 13. Sales said he had been joking and that whatever real money had been sent would be donated to charity. But as parents' complaints increased, WNEW's management suspended Sales for 2 weeks. 14. As a child I remember being fairly traumatized over a series called David the Gnome where he and his wife reach 400 and die together in the finale. They actually become cherry trees intertwined together in the next plane. I remember trying to explain to my mother why I was crying so hard watching the TV but she didn't get it. There was an episode of SpongeBob where Squidward got brain damage and thought he was a baby. Then the rest of the episode is just SpongeBob and Patrick throwing him about and poop. New SpongeBob is just plain sadistic at times. Movie rather than TV show, but if I think of that's really dark for kids, my mind always jumps to Clayton's death at the end of Tarzan. Dude accidentally hanging himself with a vine is pretty dark. Some dude in SpongeBob literally shoved a coin up a horse's ass. That one episode of Pingu where he has a nightmare. In the nightmare, a gigantic brown seal chases him while smiling creepily. This episode still gives me the spooks to this day. There is an episode of Scooby-Doo, one of the ones with Scooby, Shaggy and Scrappy only, where they are being chased around a pyramid by a mummy and they beat him by unraveling him. But then when they are leaving they turn round and footsteps are following them in the sand. They run away. Footsteps return to the pyramid and then the episode ends. Only example in classic Scooby I think where the monster was real. Fair to say I've been scared of mummies ever since. I'm in my 20s. Azula going insane at the end of Avatar scared me a lot as a kid. I think that lemon grab from Adventure Time was pretty messed up. But especially when he swallowed the other lemon grab after he broke his toy. The other lemon grab screaming in terror as he was being swallowed always got to me when I was a kid. And it still gets to me now. A few years ago, don't remember the year, New Jersey accidentally played hardcore porn in the time slot for a children's TV show. They played Mandy Gets a Handy instead of Handy Manny. In the original Powerpuff Girls there was this episode called Buttercrush that I never really forgot. Buttercup sort of got into a relationship with the leader of the Gangrene Gang, but the leader kept on taking advantage of her and she had no idea. It gets to the point where she ditches her sisters to hang out with him. But he just keeps on using her. Of course at the end she realized what was going on and beat him up. Though, I guess it really wasn't that dark or anything. But it always made me feel sick inside when I saw it. Maybe it was partly about age difference. But it was the first time I saw a relationship like that in a cartoon. Probably either the reveal of the Air Nomad's genocide in Avatar or Bill Cipher's introductory scene where he yanks a deer's teeth out of its head as a present in Gravity Falls. Nobody's mentioned the show Are You Afraid of the Dark? That poop was the most psychologically damaging show I ever watched as a child. The one that has haunted me to this day was an episode in which one way or another a young boy gets locked up in a jail cell and gets left behind in the freaking dark. That's how the episode ends, with him shouting and crying in the dark. Some Franz Kafka poop right there. The Looney Tunes where the bulldog, I think his name is Caesar or Romeo anyway, he wants to keep a kitten, his owner is already mad so he tried to hide kitten, stuff happens and he ends up believing the kitten was baked into cookies and the owner gives him a cat-shaped cookie and he's crying puddles of tears and grabs the cookie pretending it's the kitty, completely traumatized. It was pretty fricked up when Invader Zim had a plan to harvest the organs of children to make himself seem human. At the end Zim was an enormous mass of stolen organs while other kids were walking around with soda cans instead of lungs. Great show. When Big Bird asked Stevie Wonder to come take a look at this. SpongeBob, two complete strangers pretending to be Patrick's parents. Who were they? Why did they do it? What was their plan? Things I've been thinking about since I was 7 years old. Also every episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog. The Dark Crystal. Full of complete nightmare fuel. I can only assume it got a G rating is because someone said, oh, look, it's Henson and his puppet things. That must be for kids. The astronomer witch guru getting burned to death. The noise the Skeksis make. The giant cockroach army. It's not for kids. Well, the premise to Avatar: The Last Airbender is a literal genocide of the protagonist's entire people. Half of the things in Star Wars The Clone Wars could qualify. One notable example was when a corrupt general attempted to order his slave soldiers to court-martial some of their dissenting brothers and execute them via firing squad. If cartoons are allowed, then just watch Ren and Stimpy. The whole show is one massive fever dream. Literally any TV show with Dan Schneider. The most fricked up ones I remember as a kid were the stories where the baddies win in an episode and murder every one of your favorite characters before some time travel reset button is pressed at the end. I'm looking at you, Captain Scollard and Damp, Space Precinct. I can't remember any of your other episodes, but that poop stays with you. IDK if The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy is a kids show. But the episode Wishbones is pretty fricked. Especially the segment with Puddin's abusive and murderous rabbit. HR Puff and stuff. All of it. That episode of The Simpsons where Homer's mum comes back after years of being absent only to have to go on the run again. Homer crying and running after the car still haunts me today. Also from another Simpsons episode. There was a short clip where Homer took a picture of himself every day for 20 years or something similar. You watch him go from a happy toddler. Then watching his parents argue in the background. The house starts falling apart. His father Abe looks depressed. It goes into his teen years and he starts drinking. And drinking. He's now depressed. Honestly, I think they should have won an award for that. It was like a work of art. Absolutely heartbreaking yet beautiful. I'm not sure if it was a kids show, but Watership Down, the old one, was brutal. The entire movie was filled with gore, but I find that the most horrific part was when a group of rabbits got buried alive. MR. Meaty the whole show. All of it. Not actually a children's show. But the Supper Hour local news broadcast in the somewhat rural region where I grew up, so family friendly news. Basically. It was Easter, so they decided it'd be cute to have the hosts and chairs away from the usual desk. And to place a low pen. Like a sandbox. On the floor in front of them. And put some cute rabbits in the pen to just sort of hop around inside the pen. And eat some grass and be cute during the broadcast. So during the broadcast, the rabbits started doing what rabbits do. They started hopping onto each other and doing their darnedest to make some more little rabbits. The horrified hosts finally noticed this. Live broadcast though. So they had to keep trucking and talking. The single camera wasn't really able to cut away or switch angles or tile up away from the rabbits for whatever reason. The broadcast finally cut to a clip of something else. So the rabbits were off screen for a bit. The camera angle was moved up so that when the hosts came back, the rabbits were out of sight. Wonder how many horrified parents phoned in to complain. Lol. The style of this show, called The Misadventures of Flapjack, will always stay with me in my nightmares. Might be too late, but about 10-15 years ago, there was this show called MR. Meaty. It was these two puppets who would work at a burger store in the mall. Anyways, one of them got a tapeworm and the food kept disappearing on the guy who had it and they had no clue. Anyways, they used a fishing rod to get the tapeworm out and a customer saw it and swallowed it. It freaked me up when I was 10. Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Literal beheadings. Torture. Suicide. The time they bricked up a train in Thomas the Tank Engine in a tunnel forever. Removed his track and only left him a small hole from which he could see the world outside. Then the narrator said he thought the train deserved his punishment. Haven't seen it in years, but there's this episode of the Powerpuff Girls where they somehow accidentally time travel years into the future and Townsville is just destroyed because things happened and they weren't there to stop them. Everybody they know in Townsville is either scared of them or hates them for leaving. IDK, why it always just stuck with me after watching. Why hasn't anyone mentioned the time Finn got kidnapped by an army of gnomes and forced to do, and this is a direct quote from the show, sexy fun dancing on a pole for their entertainment. The wonder years when Wayne's friend comes back from Vietnam. Frick. Still gives me goosebumps to this day. I've read a couple of these so far. And the chimp one is probably the top contender. Despite Jimmy Savile being mentioned, which doesn't count since his antics weren't on television. But I've got a good one, in the show. Powerpuff Girls. One of the writers wrote himself onto the show to become, I think, Blossom's boyfriend. And they aired it.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.